And we're back.
Yes, we are.
So cool.
So
they're all cool.
You wanted to read a passage?
I would love to. And I think, is there a time limit? 4 or 5 hours? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, 45 hours.
You just stop me if I'm approaching a limit, will you? Because I don't know. I haven't timed this.
Okay.
Really.
Okay. Which book is this from?
So this is from the first volume. This is called Dissonance Volume 1 Reality. And Jet comes back to the blockade with his brother Ruddy and has some interchange and banter with Captain Stone. They go back to their bunks. They're tired. They're worn out. They've been out all performing reconnaissance missions. And Jet is back in his bunk. Takes off his boots, gets ready to sleep, can't sleep, and it remembers back to when the aliens first came and invaded the world. So here we go. I remember when the Gorgons first arrived in 2026. Admittedly, we were all enthralled. I was too. Sis was especially enthralled. Somebody in Guatemala spotted the first one, if I remember correctly. It just came drifting down straight out of the sky near sunset, so humanoid and yet enshrouded in mist. They had angelic qualities to them. Some of us wondered if they were messengers from God. Their bodies were cloaked in that bluish-green vapor. It was really creepy, but for whatever reason, it's the creepy things that draw us in the most. We just can't look away, like a moth to a flame. Then there was another, and 5 more, and then 20 more, 50, 400. More kept coming, just slowing down to a geostationary orbit 50 feet above the ground all over the earth. The dogs were perpetually screaming and howling. Some of their ears were reportedly even bleeding. They were running mad, whining and cowering in terror, fleeing to dark corners with their tails between their legs. I was only 7 then. Ruddy was just 3. Sissy was 6. But I remember it all. In the 16 years since then, they laid waste to pretty much everything, except the blockades, of course. Oh, they knew where they all were, and we didn't like it when they didn't like it when we ventured out for any reason. They got especially hot if they saw any of us heading in any direction that even remotely resembled going toward a coastline. No matter the continent, they wanted us pigeonholed far inland. We could never figure out why. Some straggled around by day still, but all we knew concretely was that they mostly reappeared every evening near dusk. Where they all largely disappeared to during the day, no one ever really knew. Apparently, they didn't like sunlight, and they would almost entirely vanish for a month on end during the summertime when it got into the high 80s and 90s. Those were our reprieves. It was times like that we actually praised all the ozoners that went before us, inconsiderate humans with their carbon emissions, fossil fuels, aerosols, and CFCs. They didn't know it, but they were actually helping us, warming up the planet, making the atmosphere hotter and hotter, more inhospitable to not just us, but them as well. I heard recently that a team of guys actually wrangled a Gorgon in the heat of summer while wearing some kind of protective eye shields, and they stripped it down. It just flailed, writhed, and screamed as it baked in the hot summer sun, sizzled and smoked even. Apparently they had some vampiric traits too. Never found out any more about it because you can't trust all stories, and I, for one, don't plan to wrangle any Gorgon to see if it tries to suck blood, too. I remember the first time I saw one for myself. Back then, they weren't really evil to behold. They just had this sort of ethereal quality to them, angelic almost, and they just sat there and hummed, floated. We tried to make contact with them, of course, but they never moved. For 3 months, they just stayed there as more and more of them slowly floated down, taking up positions. We all got uneasy, of course, because what the hell were they? Why were they here? Where did they come from? What did they want? All those questions piling up stunk more than the mound, frankly. That's their garbage pile behind the blockade. But then we got our answers, sure enough. Whether through some kind of telepathy or some primitive form of timing, they all began to move. One by one, they clicked on, like a countdown had finished or a switch had been flipped. And that's when they started hunting us down. Nothing we did mattered. Hiding was of little use. Shooting at them only made them move angrier, and they'd get faster. And that high-pitched shriek and dropped jaw thing. Lord. I remember a man kept shooting and shooting at one perched on the corner of a pretty tall building. I think he had a sniper rifle. But with each shot, the Gorgon hurtled downward faster and faster, until both it and the man disappeared in a thunderous cataclysm of concrete and dust. The Gorgon was the only one that came out of that pit, a little fatter than it had been before it smashed down. So there's an excerpt.
That was terrifying.